Welcome to our first off season for the Utah Tech Gremlins 0 overall Team Builder Dynasty. And honestly, this is a very big off season for us. I'm quite a bit nervous because, as I said it in the last episode, we absolutely need 35 recruits, and throughout the entire season, I was only able to get 4 commits. That means we need 31 commits in the off-season recruiting stage / transfer portal. That puts a lot of pressure on me, and so much so that I went offline and did some simulations of trying to sign 30 players in the transfer portal with a small school program to try and find out the strategy that I needed to get this done. It's that important that we get 35 recruits, or as many as we can, definitely over 30. And that's going to be the goal here in this episode. Before we get to recruiting, though, let's go ahead and try and fill out our coordinator spots. We fired them both at the end of last episode, and it's time to try and find some new ones. Not a ton of options available to us, but the guy I ended up liking at the offensive coordinator spot would be Joe Moorhead here. I mean, you could argue that maybe because he has 4 trees open already that he just doesn't have that much unlocked in any of them, but he does have strategist, which is a tree that I like this year quite a bit, and so having that unlocked could be really nice, even if he doesn't have the spots that I want him to have yet in that tree. Just getting it so that it's a possibility to upgrade, and maybe he has it, a year from now, could be really nice. And it's unfortunate that we don't know prior to offering them, but we'll offer him here. And then David Braun here is the defensive coordinator I ended up liking the most, so we will offer him a master motivator. Both offers now pending. Also needed to upgrade our own coach here, Lewis Smart, with such an important offseason transfer portal period upcoming. I wanted to get some increased interest from some of the positions that we're going to need to sign a bunch of players in. So we got O-line, D-line, and the receiving game transfer boost. I wasn't sure we were going to get our first choice for both coordinators, but that's exactly what happened here. Joe Moorhead accepts, as does David Braun. Thinking of the Nuggets, apparently. We get both of our coordinators that we had first on our board, so some good luck. Taking a look at what happened in the world of college football for this season. As always, Duke made it super far, but it ends up being Miami over Penn State for the Natty. One of our rivals, BYU, made it to the Final Four teams, which is kind of insane. We're going to be opening up next season against BYU, so we've got a lot of work cut out ahead of us. And as far as the portal, we have the settings set as a max of 30 players that can leave, and that's the exact amount of players that want to leave. But seeing as how they're all 0 overall, I don't really care to persuade any of them, of course. The more that we can get them off our team, the better. And now to the main course here of the offseason, the transfer portal. We already have one guy who we no longer fit his deal breaker, but this is the part of the video that I need to be pretty much perfect. We need to sign 31 players this offseason. It's not going to be easy. As far as 4-star transfers, we did have one. A freshman transfer from Georgia would have been very, very tempting, but the fact that we got that 4-star gem quarterback who needs playing time, I just couldn't offer for this guy here. It was at this point I went position by position, trying to fill out our board with players, prioritizing freshman and sophomore players that could stick with our program for multiple years where I could, and filling out our board because, remember, it wasn't just important that we sign 35 players, but they need to be the exact right positions. I showed this graph last episode, but I'll show it again. This is how precise we need to be in our recruiting, because we need to fill out an entire roster that can play for us next year, which is just not going to be easy by any means. It took me a ton of time to get this initial board set up, and I'll go ahead and cut to when I had it all figured out and what the strategy was once I had my board filled out. Once we had our board filled out, we were offering everybody a scholarship as well as putting 25 hours into people. We didn't have enough hours to go around with how many we need to commit to send the house on people, which is normally my go-to, try to get them to commit as early as I can get them to. But our strategy here isn't really to fill that many players' boards up to where they commit prior to the final week. It's just not going to really work that way if we want 30 players. I could hard sell, what would this be, roughly 13 players, and hopefully they commit within a couple weeks and then start again. But that was my strategy in season, and it did not work at all. So we're not planning on having these guys commit until the final week, which makes things very, very risky. There were some players I couldn't even put 25 hours. It had to be just 10. But we're going after uncontested players, really. As we sim forward in these weeks, if these guys are being heavily recruited elsewhere, we're just going to have to take them off our list and go for somebody else at their position. That's really the only way we're going to be able to get 30 players this year in the portal. Once we advanced a week, I'd start to go through the list looking for players that were getting heavily recruited by other teams, and if they were, it was simply going to be a no from us. So a guy like Warner here, UCLA wants him, he's off our board. Dalton, off our board. James, off our board. If we weren't number one by a wide margin after a week, we were gone, and we'd replace them with guys like this 6'5" speedster receiver, Malachi Coleman, whose name I do want you to remember for a little bit later on in this episode. But that was the process, just kind of rinse and repeat with these guys until, keeping our board at 35 every single week, trying to find prospects that were not being offered, or even if they were being offered, they were being very, very lightly recruited elsewhere. Before we go any further in the video, I got to take a quick moment to shout out Zachary Coughlin as well as Alec Anderson for becoming members on the channel. Thank you so much. I appreciate it a ton. Your support is very much so appreciated by me. And just like it was with my last series, we will be having members-only content for our Utah Tech Gremlins Dynasty. And for this series, it's going to be full uncut versions of the offseason where I talk you through all my thought processes live for the entire portal, which was a very long video for this offseason because of how important the portal season was. You'll go through all of the upgrades that we do manually, any gear updates, etc., etc. Of course, as it is with this video, I'll always show the important information of the offseason to everyone. I don't want to gatekeep any information, but for those who go a little bit extra in supporting me, I like to give them a little bit extra content. So if that sounds interesting to you and you have the means, please consider becoming a member on the channel. But let's get back to the offseason. And that was just kind of the entire process of the offseason. Position by position, week by week, making sure we always had that target number of players on our board at all times, and that with each individual player, we were always the number one player on their board. We just didn't have the hours to really compete. And after week 2, still no commits. Wasn't a massive surprise, although I was hoping some of the players that we had gotten a head start on their recruiting back during the season that they would have committed by now. We had some bad luck with linebackers, so we had to dip down into a 2-star prospect here to try and fill out that position. Linebackers just kept getting recruited elsewhere, but other than the linebacker spot, we were actually having a lot of success here, so it was just a matter of moving some hours around at these other positions to get the right amount of players. after week 3, we would finally see some players commit for the first time in the offseason. It's Blunt, who we were recruiting the entire process here, and Bobby Holyfield, but just those two, meaning going into the last week in a class that we need 35 commits, we only have 6. We are depending on 29 guys committing in the final period. And in my Ball State simulations that I did off screen that I mentioned in the top of the video, I never could quite get every single person to commit in the final week. It would always be 3 or 4 of them would decide to go elsewhere. They'd get a last-minute offer from somebody they really wanted to go to. And with a guy like Bretton Williams, he was definitely the kind of player where that would be the case. He has another team really, really close. So we decided to switch here to a hard sell, the only hard sell we would do the entire off season, and hope for the best. We might not get 35, but if we can at the very least get 30 plus after this week, it will be okay. As much as we needed all 35, if we can end up with 32 or somewhere thereabouts, we can feel good about that. We also might need to switch to a hard sell here, but this is how it goes. You're just hoping that you can find the players falling through the cracks, and that at the end of the day, even though we won't fully complete their scouting bar, that we'll just be the ones in the number 1 spots when all is said and done. That's the strategy I employed. Kind of the opposite of what we did during the season, where we were just hard selling people the entire way. We went, that got us 4 really good recruits, but only 4 recruits. We needed to try a different strategy. This is the one I went with, and it will all come down to week 4, whether or not it will be successful. And the moment of truth has arrived. I'm hoping we see a ton of commits pop up on our screen. We should see a lot. Blaine Myrick committed. Dexter Shank committed. This should be a screen that goes for quite some time. We really need a ton of recruits, and I'm liking what I'm seeing. It looks like it's going kind of position by position because that's how we set up our board initially. Going from tight end all the way to corner, though, is a bit disconcerting. We did shuffle our board after week 1, so it wasn't totally ranked by position, and it looks like, we're going back to some earlier positions here. We are getting a ton of these guys in. This is exactly the kind of screen that we needed to see. It is a very highly stressful way to recruit, to force myself into this position based off the way that we recruited during the season. We needed all these guys, and it looks like for the most part, we're getting these guys to commit to us. We'll see who fell through the cracks. Again, make sure you remember that name, Malachi Coleman. He's going to be pretty sweet once we get to the player upgrade portion of the episode. But, we had 6 total going into the final national signing day. To see all these guys come in is a thing of beauty. Going through our list here, I don't see a single person that committed to another team. Did we actually pull off all 35? Like I said, in my simulations, I was able to get maybe all but 3 or 4 of them most of the time with Ball State, but I was never able to get my entire board to commit. And going down the list, it is exactly what we did this time. We got all 35 commits. We needed a miracle of an off season to fill out our board, and it is exactly what we got. Once the dust had settled, we ended up with the 41st best class in the nation recruiting-wise, but outside of the top 10 in our own conference, which is exactly why I like doing Dynasty Rebuilds in major conferences. You can recruit and try your hardest to get really good classes and not feel bad that you're just like destroying your competition in your conference, because it's not going to be the case if you're in like the SEC or the Big Ten. Those schools at the top of these conferences always do really well in recruiting. Taking a look at dev trades, we do get Zach Harper at a star development. You love to see that. A lot of normals and impacts here, but Mitchell at tight end. He'll be coming in being a sophomore. He'll have star development. We know of these elites. My voice just cracked a bit. That's annoying. Bobby Holyfield will be star dev, our 3-star gem quarterback, who will be the backup to Asamoah. Going down the line here. A lot more impact than normal. That was to be expected, but Malachi Coleman, that 6'5" speedster receiver, will be a junior coming in, will have star developments, and that's it for the good dev traits here. Able to get a couple of stars to stack onto the elites that we got during the season. All in all, I think we did about as well as could be expected. Really risky up until the end, but with the final result, this is about as good as I could have hoped for our year one recruiting class. Taking a look at the roster prior to upgrades, Blaine Merrick, one of the few linebackers that we actually could get to come in. We had some trouble at that position in the portal, but he ends up being the guy with the highest overall prior to upgrades. Malachi Coleman comes in at an 80 with 96 speed at 6'5". What an absolute animal. A couple of our corners also in the 80s, so 4 guys at 80 plus overall. Again, prior to our upgrades here. But looks like I accidentally left one of our 0 overall receivers with 87 speed. So, I mean, at least he wasn't the slowest guy on the field. But I think we did really, really well for ourselves ultimately in our first year. We got a tight end here with some pretty solid speed, a blocker who's got 92 strength, which is kind of insane for a tight end. He could play some offensive line in a pinch if we need him to, which we honestly might this year, based on how things are. Zach Harper, our star development player there. 6'7" as well, which you love to see. He's actually a pretty good athlete. I wanted to check on the athleticism of our offensive linemen because we obviously can't see that prior to them signing. But let's go ahead now and take a look at what our roster looks like after some offseason upgrades. Blaine Merrick, our number 1 overall rated player prior to upgrades, is up to an 86 following his offseason progression. Max Tucker, one of the 2 nice little corners that we got on the team, is up to an 84. Evan Johnson will be up to an 83 after his offseason progression. And then Malachi Coleman, he had 44 points to spend. This is the most fun progression, I think, of the offseason. So I'll show you all the points we put into him here. We had a lot to choose from. With 44, despite the fact that he already has 96 speed, you could even make an argument for upping it even one more, which I would end up doing here in his offseason progression, but wanted to make sure we got some solid boosts to route running as well as his hands. But 34 still left after some route running upgrades. Got him up to 97 speed. His catching is now into the 90s. I mean, he's looking really good. And just want to make sure that we can use all these points to the best of our abilities here. He has 3 left. We'll use them on IQ up to an 85 overall on Coleman. And then the last probably big upgrade was Noah Dunham, who started at a 78, ends up at an 83, gets added to the 80 overall club for our team. As for the rest of the roster, we ended up with 5 players at an 80 plus overall, a couple in the high 70s, but then you start to get a pretty big drop off after that. A lot of juniors and seniors at the top of the overall board, which of course makes sense. but we have a lot of intriguing youth, and then a lot of the 12 overall guys ended up going up quite a bit to the point where you obviously don't want to play them, but if they did, they wouldn't, give up 178 points a game or anything like that. Probably still like 100, but given the fact that they'll probably play very limited snaps if they do, that's not so bad. And for the ones that I did end up releasing a lot of the 12 overall players in positions that allowed me to. I will end up with a roster size of only 58, barely higher than an NFL team for season 1 of our rebuild. 58 players in total. That brings us here to the end of the offseason. 2 more things I want to show you before we end off the episode. Number 1 is our schedule. Like I said, we will be opening up against BYU. We'll be at Swig Stadium, so it'll be our first look at our brand new stadium. We'll have bye weeks for both week 0 and 1, so at least it won't be a couple weeks before we start losing. Now, we do have a chance against a team like FCS Midwest. We are a 51 overall squad. Midwest is a 50, so we'll actually have the advantage there, surprisingly enough. And Georgia Southern, I think, is I don't know what conference they play in, if I'm being honest. Let's keep looking. I think they're very low overall as well. They're higher than us, but I can't find them. But they're in the 50s, and so we have a chance against these 2 schools, but that's going to be really it. After Georgia Southern, we're not winning another game this year. I'd be very surprised. If we could squeak out 1, that would be great. We do have another rivalry matchup against UCLA in week 8, but gonna be a tough schedule. 2-10 is probably the goal for us this year, which, coming off a year when we went 0-12, losing 150 points per game, would probably be a pretty good upgrade. Last thing I wanted to do is actually wanted to show you what our coordinators have. You can't do it right when you sign them, but we can now. In terms of the motivator tree, we only have tier 3, which is the one you really want on the quarterbacks, but we'll get a quarterback offseason boost, which will be nice. We got a couple of nice quarterback recruits from this last cycle. We're getting some solid boosts here as well through the tactician tree. You'll love to see that. Strategist, also a spot where you want the tier 3. He doesn't have anything there yet, but he does have some good points put into here, whereas he only needs 1 for both quarterback and offensive line to lower their deal breaker thresholds, which could be important especially for the offensive line, because after some of our upgrades, we're no longer meeting the deal breaker thresholds for some of our offensive linemen. So if he could get that tier 3 ability this year, that would be awesome. And for the recruiter, he is going to help us take even less time to scout our offensive players, which will be nice. As for our defensive coordinator, he has Master Motivator, which he has defensive linemen and linebackers are less likely to transfer, which is awesome. Apart from strategist being lowering deal breakers, having this is also, if you can have that combination, it's really going to help you out in the portal here. And he has the offseason boost for linebackers. Not quite yet for the defensive line or secondary, but he's really close on both of them. Hopefully he can get them during this year, although we're not going to do a ton of winning this year, so I don't know how much we'll be getting any upgrades there. In terms of architect, once again, it's the tier 3 ability you want here. Chance to increase random skill caps. He doesn't have any of those yet. And he also has the mastery tree in scheme and the tactician tree, which is really cool. So I think we got a couple of really solid coordinators here, and that is going to be the end of the episode here. Next episode, I'll be showing you my initial recruiting board, and we will be seeing our guys play for the first time against BYU. That is going to be tough. I said in episode 1, we're not going to watch every game, and that is going to be the case, although we'll probably be watching a lot early because BYU is a rivalry week, and then those other 2 games are really the only opportunities for wins that we will have. So we'll probably go pretty slow to start off the season because I want to watch all 3 of those games, and then we will likely pick things up rather significantly and maybe do 3 weeks at a time oftentimes from that point on. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please drop a like. It helps me out a lot. And one last shameless plug. If you are interested in seeing the uncut version of this offseason and all the off seasons to come, this one was over an hour. Consider becoming a member of the channel if you do have the means. It's a great way to support me. I know not everyone can or wants to do it, but if that's something that interests you, I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, you'll get your personal shout out as well. But that's all I've got for the video. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back soon with more Utah Tech Gremlins Dynasty. And I'll see you then. Go Gremlins, baby.